Then Calvin Coolidge came in. I don't know a lot about Calvin Coolidge yet. I'm looking into him. He might be my favorite president so far. I like the guy. He assumed the presidency after Harding dropped dead, I think of a heart attack. Well, he continued with a small government, lower tax strategy. He talked about not building up the weak by pulling down the strong, not being in a hurry to legislate new laws, and cutting the size of government. Coolidge and Harding decreased the real per capita federal expenditures, the size of the government, from $170 per year in 1920 to $70 in 1924. These policies, along with fostering the mentality of self-reliance, the opposite of what the progressives had been preaching in the previous 20 years, and the opposite of what progressives teach now. They're not saying be self-reliant. They're saying too big to fail. You can't make it without the government safety nets. Stand on your own 2 feet, America. What followed was arguably the most prosperous 8 years this country has ever seen. It changed the world. You probably heard a little term called the Roaring Twenties, right? How come we don't study that more? The progressive history books have done their best to hide the fact that a lot of it had to do with Mellon's tax policies, including the tax cuts for the wealthy and the reducing of the size of government. Progressives don't want you to know this, and I guarantee you the blogs are on fire right now. Oh, Glenn Beck's pushing for small government tax cuts. That caused the Great Depression. No. I'm actually going to go out on a little limb here and use common sense. The same things that caused the problems today were the root of the problem in 1929. History repeats itself. Greed, the Federal Reserve, the government making every single mistake they could possibly make and trying to bail everybody out. By the way, everybody always blames Herbert Hoover as a Republican. Look Herbert Hoover up. He was a progressive Republican. He was going in the opposite direction he believed in, growing the size of government. But that's for another show. What happened in 1921 when they cut taxes? See if this would affect you. Automobile production was up 191% for the decade. And while the elites bemoaned the wealthy fat cats and their automobiles, their appetite for driving created jobs. The demand for auto-related products skyrocketed. Do you think it was the rich that were in creating the metal and the lumber and the steel and the cotton and the leather and the paint and the rubber and the glass and gasoline? Companies had to be created to meet the demand. Who got the jobs? This is real lasting job creation through innovation. People had to be hired. Roads were being built. State highway construction spending increased tenfold between 1918 and 1930. Did they fire all the cops and teachers? No, they didn't. They innovated their way. In 1920, there were only 5,800 people who had ever flown on an airplane. By 1930, it was 70 times that amount. RCA changed the world with the radio. Along with the radio came another invention or another idea, advertising. Now you could hear Babe Ruth hitting home runs anywhere in the country while someone was telling you about a product. Thomas Edison brought us movies in the 1880s. You know when they really started to take off? In the 20s, the true modern era motion picture arrived. Cecil B. DeMille and the Ten Commandments. A whistling Mickey Mouse was introduced to America by Walt Disney in 1928. The first cartoon was synchronized sound. Conveniences like the telephones had been around forever. But in the 1920s, they became less expensive and more commonplace. More Americans in the 1920s had irons and vacuums and washing machines and refrigerators. All of these new products meant there was a demand for something else, energy. America needed huge power plants. Do you think little spaceships came with workers and we hired space aliens to build them? All of this innovation and growth, to anyone else, does it sound like lasting job creation? Assuming the federal government doesn't come in and screw it up. They do it every time. Unlike the temporary jobs or the low-paying census jobs our government is creating right now, per capita income had increased 37% from 1921 to 1929. Got it? the average person's salary went up 37% in 8 years. People had the opportunity to save and invest like never before. They gained access to things for the first time in their life. Little things we don't even think twice about, like the telephone or life insurance. America was coming into her own. And all of this success, all of the innovation, all of the prosperity, without punishing the rich or without being told what to create or how to create by a big government. And it absolutely baffled and scared the bat snot out of the progressives, especially that everyone benefited from the bottom up. Evidence? Leon Trotsky. Know this guy? Marxist revolutionary in the Soviet Union with Lenin. Love him, love the beard, looking good. He lived in New York City in 1917. He fought all his life for Marxism to help the working class. When he arrived in New York, here's what he said, quote, "We rented an apartment in a workers' district, an apartment at $18 a month that was equipped with all sorts of conveniences that we Europeans were not used to. Electric lights, gas cooking range, bath, a telephone, automatic service elevator, even a chute for the garbage. This was in the working class." I mean, what would Mr. Communism himself have said about New York a decade later? This was the condition for everybody under evil, evil capitalism. I can tell you what the intellectuals and the progressives said. When it was happening, in the Roaring '20s, F. Scott Fitzgerald said, Americans had engaged in the greatest, gaudiest spree in history. Really, F? What was the Great Gatsby all about? How materialistic and evil the average American had become? Did you read your own book? Was it the average American standing there at the edge of his dock gazing over the water in the twilight to see the light of his beloved Daisy? No. The fact was that the middle class was closing in on the upper class, and they didn't like it. Because of the policies of smaller government, decreasing government spending, and cutting taxes on the wealthy. It works, and it didn't sit well, and it still doesn't sit well with progressives. Well, America, you got a choice to make. We're in the same place in history today. You have a choice. Do we listen to the elites? Oh, yes, like the New York Times, who is now warning you of the danger of cutting spending and lowering taxes. That's nonsense. Or do you listen to your own gut, your own common sense? These things are not magical, like they try to make it sound in Washington. They work in your own home. Let me ask you, raise taxes on the richest people, okay? I've never worked for a poor guy before in my life. I've never worked for a guy who was in poverty. So I'm going to say the richest people are your boss and the people creating jobs. If your boss is having trouble keeping the doors of your business open, do you go in and demand a raise? Our businesses are struggling. How can our government go in and demand more from them? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work in your world. It doesn't work in any world. Let me ask you this. If you're in debt, do you ever say in your real life, you know, the only way out of this is to continue spending? They'd lock you in a booby hatch. We need to set the country back on the course of personal responsibility. Stand up and take care of your own self. You're responsible. Nobody else. I don't want anybody else responsible for me. We've got to put personal responsibility and innovation back into America. Innovation. When we invent our way out of this, that will lead to real prosperity and a better life for all of American citizens. But somebody who disagrees with me is Time Magazine's joke line. He's the guy who recently explained that there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with Barack Obama. It just means that you're stupid. He has an update for us next.